Hello there, everyone, and welcome to Strike Me Pink. It is the short, sharp South Australian sports podcast named in honour of the great Ken KG Cunningham and his famous catch cry, Strike Me Pink. I'm Ben Hook. I'm with the number one sports presenter in South Australia, Tommy Wren. We are big on opinions. We're short on time. Let's get into it. Tommy, good afternoon. And it is Thursday afternoon. It has been a massive news day in sport.
Huge 24 hours or so, hasn't it been, Hooky? Looking forward to diving into it, and no bigger story at the moment than the AFL one regarding the concussion tests that have been happening, and we're getting more and more information. Jay Clark has been all over it with the Herald Sun / advertiser.
And I imagine you are becoming all over it as the afternoon progresses. What did you make of it when you first learned of it? Because the details are jaw-dropping.
A bit jarring, wasn't it? I couldn't believe that it's happened. I mean, given everything now we're learning about concussions and just the ramifications, I thought, gee, this has got so many different tentacles, I suppose, that branch out from the story. Who's representing this player? How's it allowed to fall through? Where's the AFL on this? All of that. So a bit like you, jaw hit the floor. I found out at about 5 o'clock this morning as I was getting in for radio. Yeah. So I was a bit like that, and I'm sure you were the same, Hooky.
Yeah, 100% I was. Tom, look, we don't know where this is going to go. It's still very, very premature. It's very difficult to make a verdict on all of these things. But the last time I can recall that a club and a player made a side deal that was kept secret from the AFL, it was the Kurt Tippett scandal. And Kurt Tippett missed 11 games. And the Adelaide Football Club lost 2 years' worth of draft picks. Now, I don't know if it's reasonable to attach some equivalence to those two scenarios, but it seems like if Geelong have done what's a pretty shady deal to keep a player playing when they probably should have paid him out and not had him on the field, I think there's going to be some significant repercussions for that.
And I think there has to be. I mean, I think Geelong are perceived as being, a bit of a darling of the AFL, and I think you're right. The problem is there seems to be so many conflicts in amongst all of this, Hooky, but yes. How's it allowed to get to this point? And I think you're right. If the AFL have got any teeth, they have to come down hard on this. I mean, a player's welfare, signing away their rights, it doesn't matter how senior or otherwise they are. I think they have to be seen to be, making a bit of an example of what's happened here. Otherwise, I don't think it's going to pass the pub test. And a lot of people out as supporters are going to be questioning what on earth is going on.
You talk about conflicts, and probably the biggest conflict of all is that the AFL Commission chairman, who should be coming down on this like a ton of bricks, his name is Craig Drummond. He was actually the president of Geelong when this deal was signed. So it's going to be very, very difficult for him to legitimately be assessing himself and whether he's managed things properly. So I suspect at some point, if there's some genuine integrity to this system, Craig Drummond is going to have to stand aside and allow someone else to take over an investigation into this, because it's a terrible look if Craig Drummond remains as the president of the AFL looking into the actions of the president of Geelong when he's the same guy.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Hooky. I'm just, having a look through it now. He can't, be a part of this process, given his position at the time. He has to declare, a conflict of interest because he was there at the time, and they have to do it independent of him. So it's got hairs on it. It's messy. And, that's why I think it has to be a really transparent process now, because we keep being told the head is sacrosanct and the AFL is doing all of this work. And even look at a little case like Darcy Fogarty getting a 3-week suspension for his tackle, just a loose forearm. If they're got to be that stringent and that harsh on something that's happened on the field, I would have thought something that's off the field that is pre-planned and preordained. This has to be a significant penalty if the allegations, which we're reading from Jay Clark, turn out to be true.
The other most jaw-dropping factor of all of this is Craig Drummond was a director of the Florey Institute of Neuroscience and Mental Health for 8 years between 2009 and 2017. So very much overlapping with his involvement in football. Now, the Florey Institute is the largest brain research centre in the Southern Hemisphere. So it just beggars belief that you can have endorsed, we presume, at board level, this deal with the Geelong player and the Geelong Football Club to, force the player to underwrite his own potential concussion outcomes while being a part of the Flora Institute as well. That is just staggering to me.
It is, isn't it? And it makes you think now, they clearly don't want a repeat of this or other people, because what precedent does it set? And I think there now needs to be, input from the Players Association. And we both know James Gallagher, very impressive young man. There needs to be a template or a framework set up now where it's one size fits all. And, you cannot sign away a player's rights independent of the league and everything else. It's just... It's so messy because players they're in their most vulnerable state, Hooky, when they're signing this away. Of course they want to hold on to their careers for as long as possible. So if, $400,000, $500,000, $700,000, whatever they're earning, if you don't sign this, you're not going to be able to get that. Okay, where do I sign? And I don't blame them for that, but that needs to be taken out of their hands. And the AFL, as I said, and you've sort of iterated as well, they have to make a real example of this and make sure that it cannot happen again, and there needs to be boundaries set up moving forward.
It's going to be one to watch, and it's certainly going to be one to see how far this stretches. And to the extent from zero to fully cognizant were the AFL in and amongst this picture.
Yeah.
We know the AFL Commission chairman clearly must have had some understanding of it because he was part of Geelong at the time, but how far that stretched into the AFL, which is all-encompassing, that will be certainly fascinating to watch as I guess the powers that be, including you, Tom, continue to uncover it. We have a hard and fast policy of 20 minutes, Tom, and we've already burnt a third of that on one story, so let's keep moving on. One of probably the most fascinating thing for the week was Greg Swann having admitted that he hadn't even considered the possibility that a team might take in the final minor round before we head into the inaugural wildcard series. Sent an email out on Monday telling the clubs that they'll be watching very closely if anyone mass res a group of players, and that they'll be coming down very tough on anyone who chooses to do so. Pretty much to a man, everyone in the AFL has said, go take a hike, Greg. That is absolutely none of your business, and we'll manage our teams how we like. Where do you stand on all of this?
Yeah, and I think they've summed it up pretty well. I mean, all the clubs, the Bulldogs, Collingwood, Carlton, they're in that situation. Now, if they've qualified, it's probably more so for clubs like the Dogs and Collingwood. If they're not able to get in the top six, but they know they're going to finish 7th, 8th or 9th, why would they risk any player who's in any kind of doubt that's got a health risk? Why would they play them when the game is meaningless? Of course they're going to rest them. And threatening them otherwise is lunacy. Clubs do a pretty good job of protecting players' welfare and health anyway. That's totally fair enough. And the hypocrisy, Hooky, we've got this system where NGAs and father-sons, clubs are encouraged, like Port Adelaide, to finish lower on the ladder. So hence we're seeing Port, Addis is there, right, and they're doing it cleverly, putting, Zach Butters probably isn't the right example, but Jack Watkins, they're putting him out. They're putting Logan Evans out for surgery because they're better off finishing in the bottom 5. And yet for this one particular round, they're kicking up a stink. It's just so inconsistent and hypocritical. And further to that, Greg Swann, look, he's probably doing a great job, but I do laugh. The Brisbane Lions, he was there, and good on him. When he was administrator, they milked the NGAs and father-sons, and they've got the Ashcrofts and, all these players that have come through on their list for the next 10 years, and they're going to be a dynasty. And then as soon as he comes in, he makes it harder for every other club that's now trying to get NGAs and father-sons. I mean, it's just the swip swap and the flip-flopping that goes on is just insane for me.
Great. So, Tommy, you've said that, as far as you can assess, Greg's probably doing a great job. I mean, I would probably take the counter view to all of that. And I accept that coming in and stepping in as, overseeing AFL football operations is an inordinately difficult job. And I would say that to anyone who tried to take that on, there is a heck of a lot of push and pull, so many different working parts, and it would be very, very complicated. But Greg Swann came in to rescue the AFL football department and its governance from rules through umpiring, the ARC, everything. And he did so because it was largely of the belief that Laura Kane was not up to the job. Now, I'd happily argue that football governance right now in the AFL is demonstrably worse this year than it was last year under Laura Kane. Now, nobody seems to want to criticise Swann, whereas last year everyone was quick to have Laura Kane in the gun. And I just feel like, yes, it's a very difficult, it's a very nuanced job, but Swann, I think, has demonstrated to me that he's probably not really up to the capability of what you need to do. He strikes me as the sort of person who is a water cooler manager. So stands around by the water cooler and says, did you see that issue that came up in the AFL last week? I could fix that in 5 minutes. And not only does he think that he has a solution to a problem that should have been addressed in the first place, he never really thinks through the after effects of the problem that he subsequently creates by trying to come up with a new solution. And to actually admit on radio, you know what, we never even considered what we were going to do about the potential for tanking in the final minor round, and then come up with an answer that was just so bereft of any real and reasonable logical thought. I don't know, Tom, but quite frankly, I'd be happy to go back to 25 and let Laura Kane run it again, because I think there will always be issues and mistakes, but I don't think there'll be the gravity of which we've seen run under Greg Swann in 2026.
And the stand rule's a mess. The umpiring's a real issue at the moment. There's a lot of issues to fix. And I think fans right now are super frustrated with that. He's got to sort that out. And then all of this on top doesn't help. Look, I'm prepared to give him a little bit more time, but he's a senior person, been in it for a while. His feet are well and truly under the desk now, has to sort out. And for me, umpiring's the number one thing right now they've got to work.
The big announcement that I guess affects South Australian sport more than anything, Tom, is that LIV Golf CEO Scott O'Neill has declared that he has an investor set to sign, and that's going to be enough to see them through into 2027. I think there are still plenty of question marks around that, but in isolation, the possibility that we're going to see a tournament at Kooyonga next year should give us some cause for hope.
I think it's a good thing, Hooky, and I'm like you waiting to see the finer details, the Tintax of it all. Do they keep John Rahm and Bryson DeChambeau, or is there not enough money? I think once they lose those two players, it becomes a pretty minor tour on a global stage. That said, I think we'll still turn up. You and I know Adelaide really well. People will still go. I hope that it survives. I hope that we still get it with the Australian Opens that are coming. I think the government have done a pretty good job with that. So I think it's positive news, albeit the devil's in the detail, and I'm really intrigued to see how much money and whether or not they can hold the bulk of this tour moving forward.
Yeah, I think that it will remain to be seen whether this money is invested or being lent. I think it'll remain to be seen the extent to which the PIF will claim ownership over the product itself and how much equity can actually be given away to the players. And then I really think as well, it will be, is the money that's going to be coming from BC Partners, which has been identified in the last couple of hours, a London-based capital firm that is going to be putting in or it's supposedly investing this funding, to what extent is it cognizant on keeping the best players? So, we have heard a number of stories that there are going to be LIV players who are going to walk away. Is John Rahm going to be satisfied with the potential that LIV 2.0 will be coming out of bankruptcy, and that therefore his 150 million or whatever it is that he's still owed is potentially void and he receives that back in equity? And then you've got that against the backdrop of the fact that it's going to be very, very difficult for LIV to keep its OWGR points that it was able to generate this year, because it's going to go to a 10 tournament tour without any links to any other tour. So it's going to be very difficult to promote and relegate. And then the other thing that sort of stands out to me as well, Tom, is that with the PGA Tour structure, they're going into a bit of a transition year in 2027, but people are going to be trying to position themselves in 2027 to either get into the Championship Series or the Challenger Series in 2028. And is it going to be smart for a guy like John Rahm to cut his losses with LIV now, spend his 2027 trying to get as many qualifying points as he can so he can get himself into the extraordinarily wealthy Championship Series in 2028? So I think there's a number of questions. You've identified them, I've identified them, and I look forward to seeing where that all falls. And we'll really know where they're at in 6 weeks.
Yeah, exactly right. I think that's spot on. And look, I think it's great that there is, some kind of announcement and they're, trying to do something. But like we've said, we're waiting to see now whether or not they can make it viable moving forward.
Let's play some stock exchange. Tom, it's the game where we try and buy, sell and hold sporting commodities with a bit of a focus on South Australia, but we might go a little bit more broad today. Tom, if you had the capacity to purchase, which stock are you going to buy right now?
Well, I'm going to buy a jockey. I was watching the races today, Hooky, which I probably shouldn't have been doing on a Thursday, but I had a little bit of a look and I saw the comment and the caller said it's one of the worst things he's seen beaten. It was called Ortofina in race 1 at Gosford today. Adam Hieronymus didn't have his best right on that. So I'm going to buy him because he's a good jockey and his stock may have just lowered a little bit. So I'll buy him because I reckon he'll be hungry to make amends after that one today at Gosford.
I had a similar one in the back of my head. I was going to buy some Corey Durden after just becoming an absolute turnover merchant in the game against GWS on the weekend, but we'll spare him the ignominy. I'm going to buy some James Hird, though. Now that Dean Solomon's out, he's becoming increasingly irresistible as the Essendon coach, I reckon.
I like that.
Going to be very, very difficult for the panel to get off him. So that's probably where I'm going to make a bit of a purchase ahead of what I expect to be an announcement in the next couple of weeks. Who are you selling, Tommy?
I'm going to sell Carlton. I know they've been amazing. 9 and 2 under Josh Fraser, which is phenomenal, but they've got a tricky run home. They've got St Kilda this week, which is eminently winnable. But then after that, Hooky, they've still got Bulldogs, and then they've got Freo, who we know are very good, albeit they might rest a few. I reckon they're going to speak. We've spoken about the issue. They could rest half their team. But I think Carlton has still a chance to miss the 10. I hope they don't. I think they're a great story, but I'm going to sell Carlton because I think their price right now could just be at a peak.
To be honest, I'm going in a similar direction. I'm going to sell a stake in Collingwood. Now, I know this could be absolutely outrageous, but they've got West Coast in Perth this weekend. West Coast will be filthy at the way they played against Richmond. They dropped one that they absolutely should have won, and I really feel like they will be determined to right that wrong. And Collingwood, lots of injuries, still struggling with where they're positioned. I think they would probably feel like that whatever happens, they're going to end up in the wildcard round somewhere. Maybe this is a good week to give maybe one or two more a bit of a breather. So, yeah, I just reckon this might be a good time to get out of my Collingwood shares. I'm going to sell Collingwood ahead of their game with West Coast. And if they get up and win, well, I've done my dough, too bad. But I reckon that might be a little bit of, how would I say, Tom? What's the word?
Bit of value. Hooky, for what it's worth.
Bit of value.
Yeah, for what it's worth, West Coast are my line bet in the AFL of the week. I think exactly the reasons you said. They're plus, I think, 19.5. I reckon they will give them a red-hot shake this week.
Who are you going to hold?
I'm going to hold St Kilda. I know I just said that's a 50-50 game. If they lose, I think it could be disaster, but I've got a feeling they could also lift, and then they've got a pretty good run on the way home, and they could still make the top 10, but I'm not convinced, so I'm just going to hold for now on the Saints.
Going to hold GWS. Still reckon they're a big chance of making the top 10. They've got a pretty good run. They played Gold Coast, then West Coast. That gets them to 11 wins. They probably come into the last game taking on the Crows at Adelaide Oval for a berth in the wildcard round. And the Crows could be one of those teams that are absolutely set for a 5th or 6th place and don't really need to win and might be another organisation that's just going around for the sake of it. So who knows? But I'm going to hold on to my GWS top 10 shares. Tom, we play the 3-word verdict. Verdict, I beg your pardon. I've got a couple of topics for you. Just very quickly, give me a 3-word rapid-fire response. Wildcard round.
Think it's great.
Jake Weatherald.
Hope he goes well. I gave you 4. Big gamble. What about that? Big gamble instead, because he's backing himself.
I like it. Adam Goods.
Controversial.
So the issue, John Longmire has spoken about how difficult he dealt with the whole booing issue in Adam Goods' last year in the AFL.
I'd say, yeah, sad story. You know, we want him involved in the game. Sad that it's gotten to this point and that he's such a divisive figure. It's just a bit sad for me because he's a legend of the game.
The regret should be broad with all of that.
Yep.
Race walking, which I noticed in the Commonwealth Games, Tom. Race walking.
Overrated. What about you?
The best description I ever heard of race walking is it's a bit like a competition to see who can whisper the loudest. Collingwood president, Collingwood CEO, I beg your pardon, Craig Kelly.
Bit unfortunate. I like what Josh Carr did, but I don't think what he said was that bad. And we work in the media, Hooky. I like people to have opinions. I actually think Josh Carr might have been a bit defensive. So I think a little bit unlucky. I'm going to say a bit unlucky.
I think, yeah, you're right. I like the fact that Josh Carr went searching for a fight, But you know what? If I was Craig Kelly, I would have doubled down. I would have just said, hey,
Totally.
listen, Josh Carr needs to understand that we're the Collingwood Football Club and we are bigger than everyone else. And we will use that to our advantage at every possible opportunity. Fly the flag for your club. I don't have a problem with it at all. Hey,
and then put it back in Horn Francis's face and put Adelaide's face and say, you got Horn Francis 4 years ago doing exactly the same thing.
I'll finish with that. Give me a 3-word verdict on Jason Horn Francis ahead of his 100th game this weekend.
My favourite player. I love him.
Oh, gee, that's good. Is that right? I did not realise that. Where does that come from?
I just love that. Given I can't stand the fact he gets lambasted for moving clubs because he's not the first, and I know that mistakes were made, but he gets booed and pilloried, and I just think his ability to go forward, take a mark, take the game on, he's so tough. He set the tone in the showdown. I reckon he's the reason they won it, him and Butters, obviously. But I just love his endeavour. I just think he's everything that's good about footy. He reminds me of Paddy Dangerfield, who I also adore. So, yeah, I just love him. He's so watchable.
I'm going to cut a little bit out here, Tom. We were going to talk about who had the worst week. It was probably Gianni Infantino, wasn't it? He's had a pretty tough week, hasn't he?
Worst of the lot. Shocker.
Stacey Marinkovic, the Diamonds coach, didn't have a great week either, but we'll move on from that. The receipt I had, me declaring the beginning of the end of Alistair Clarkson as an AFL coach, that might have been a little bit premature, so I'll take that one on the chin. But I want to get to Hooky's Local Sport Minute because, Tommy, this is one of the great stories of all time. This year is the 75-year anniversary of one of the most amazing seasons in country football. We're talking about the Broughton League and the run between Blyth and Snowtown, who, ironically enough, are is a merged club now. So Blyth Snowtown play as a merged entity. But back in the 50s, they were the great rivals. And in 1951, how about this, Tom? They met 3 times in the minor round. They met 3 times during the season before the grand final. The first time was a draw. The second, Blyth won by 2 points. And the third, Snowtown won by 7 points. That led them to meet again in the grand final. Now, that game, would you believe, ended in a draw, and it was rescheduled for the following Saturday. The 2 captains turned up in the middle for the toss of the coin the next Saturday, and it was a pretty wet day, and would you believe they flipped the coin, and the coin landed dead set on its side, at which point one of the captains just laughed and said, oh, that probably means it'll be another draw. Well, sure enough, would you believe it was? They went and had a draw the second week running. Snowtown got up by about 4 or 5 goals at half time, but Blyth came back in the second half, another drawn game. 7,000 people turned up for the third grand final, and this was a reverse. Blyth got out to a lead early. Snowtown came back. It was level with just minutes to go. Snowtown kicked a point, and then Blyth kicked it out. Snowtown turned the ball over, kicked a goal, and the siren sounded, and they'd won by 7 points. But these 2 teams played 6 times in that year, for 3 draws, a 7-point, a 3-point, a 7-point, and a 2-point, including 2 consecutive drawn grand finals, 75 years on this year, Tom. What an incredible story of South Australian footy.
Brilliant for you, story. I love that one. It sounds a bit like the Sydney West Coast sort of era of 2004 to 2007, but that's a beauty.
Yeah, what a cracking story. So I'm sure there'll be plenty of stories to do. That was actually told by a guy, I think his name was Ray Carlson. He's 95 now, and was one of the young lads playing for the Snowtown team. So I got retold via a good friend of mine, Peter Lyon. So I thought that was worth sharing with you. To wrap us up, Tom, what do you reckon the headline will be in the Advertiser on Monday morning?
Well, I'm going to go with Saints shredded. If they lose, they're going to be the back page and maybe even front page with Ross Lyon and everything going on. So Saints shredded if they get done by Carlton. What about you?
My headline will be Swann backs down. Pick whoever the heck you like, the footy boss says. I think he's thrown his hands in the air with a little bit of this. Tom, we are way over time, 24 and a bit minutes, but my word, my friend, always love your insight, your expertise and your opinion on all of these sorts of things. Look forward to doing it all again with you next week. Have a great afternoon in the newsroom.
You too. Thanks so much, Hooky. Great to catch up.
Well done, mate.